Part 38. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 376. Dear Lord Lucien, thank you for your help. Orlando stepped forward carefully and respectfully saluted the armored man. Although his heart was also full of doubts, such as how Lucien could become Count Angeli's subordinate. For example, why does this person still look calm and composed even though he has a big bloody hole dug out in his chest? However, one thing is very clear, my life was saved by the man in front of me. Moreover, Orlando, who had been forced to a dead end, once again turned around and saw hope of survival. It's even possible to go one step further. Colin looked at Orlando in front of him through the eyes of blood slave Lucien, and felt quite emotional in his heart. The chaos in Alfalfa City was indeed planned by Colin, but things developed beyond his expectations. I have to say that human subjective initiative is a wonderful thing. Every individual in the chaos is struggling for his own interests, his own hatred, and his own destiny. Harry, Blue, Ron, Capone, Orlando. In Colin's eyes, these characters, who should be small characters and chess pieces, may not be willing to follow the path Colin planned for them. These are the variables. This is why, the more complex the conspiracy, the more difficult it is to succeed. Simple and crude methods rarely lead to unplanned situations. However, if you want to be simple and crude, you must have the strength to break the situation with force. This, at least in Alfalfa City, Colin is not yet able to do. That's why he planned all this. Although there were many accidents, fortunately, the final result satisfied him. Moreover, Colin also received a surprise: Orlando. The thief leader of Alfalfa City may have a humble background, he may have had a bad past, and his character may even be questionable, but this time he really impressed Colin. The calmness when facing a desperate situation, the wisdom to see through the puzzle, the courage to survive in the face of death, the courage to use himself as bait. When living in a different place, Colin asked himself that he might not be able to do better than him. This is a talent. If used properly, it may be able to help Colin secretly control Alfalfa City, and even cause great trouble to the Eastern Territory. It's a pity that Orlando is not a knight, otherwise, Colin would have wanted to transform him into a vampire. It would be too wasteful to transform into a blood slave. Lord Lucien, Orlando looked at the silent armored man and couldn't help feeling a little uneasy, so he reminded him, "Your injury. It's a small injury, it's okay." Colin controlled Lucien and waved his hand casually, fidgeting with the damaged armor to cover the unsightly wound. Orlando's mouth twitched and he didn't dare to say anything, so he changed the subject and said, "Lord Lucien, I wonder if I can pay homage to Count Angeli and express my gratitude in person." "The Count can't meet you yet." Colin refused lightly. Seeing the disappointment on Orlando's face, he said again, "However, the Earl knows about you and is very satisfied with you." Orlando regained hope and said quickly, "Thank you, the Earl, for your approval. Please tell the Earl that I am willing to swear allegiance to him. No matter what the Earl orders, I will do my best to do it. I will convey your sincerity to the Earl, but under the current circumstances, you cannot be exposed yet." Orlando rolled his eyes, seeming to understand something, and immediately nodded and said, "Yes, I wonder what the Count has planned for me." There was no emotion or anger in the armored man's deep eyes, and his tone was extremely stiff. "Earl," the Lord said, "since you can guess his plan and get out of this puzzle, it means you are a smart person. Therefore, the Earl is willing to give you a chance to prove yourself. Without Capone, Brother Alfalfa, the meeting needs a new leader, and in this position, you do have great hope now. Later, you will go to number 87 Felon Street, where the Earl left a gift for you. At the same time, this is also the Earl's greatest help that your Lord can give you. As for whether you can control the underground forces in Alfalfa City in the future, it depends on your own ability. Thank you, Lord Earl, for your trust. I will definitely not let him down, Orlando said loudly. He had already vaguely guessed what gift Count Angeli had left for him. Moreover, he also knew that this could be both a gift and his own lifeline. However, Orlando accepted the gift without hesitation. This near-death experience made him understand a lot of things. A small person like him has no power or strength. He may have a fairly smart head, but he cannot survive in such troubled times based on this alone. He had to rely on something. Moreover, Orlando actually knew very well that he did not have the right to refuse. Count Angeli sent people to save him, and he could also send people to destroy him. Therefore, Orlando must follow the script set by Count Angeli and give the drama in Alfalfa City a perfect ending. Raising his head, Orlando asked again, "Lord Lucien, I wonder if Lord Count has a detailed plan." The armored man shook his head and said, "No, the next step is up to you." Yes, Orlando, there was some worry in my heart, but more of it was an eagerness to try. The armored man saw the ambition of this little man in his eyes, but didn't say anything more. Instead, he turned around and picked up Capone, who was fainting on the ground, and disappeared into the dark night in a few flashes. Orlando stared at the place where the armored man disappeared for a long time, then turned and went downstairs. A group of loyal boys had gathered downstairs, and they immediately gathered around Orlando after seeing him. They had been ordered not to come up no matter what happened upstairs, so they were all anxious after hearing the sound of fighting. Only now did they finally feel relieved when they saw Orlando reappearing safe and sound. "Boss, we have found out it was Musos who leaked your whereabouts to Capone." Orlando nodded, seemingly not surprised by the news, and did not give any instructions, as if this leaker was not worthy of him at all. Too much attention. The boys looked at each other in disbelief as Orlando walked out without saying a word, and they had no choice but to follow him quickly. Under the cover of night, Orlando successfully arrived at the address the armored man told him, and then successfully found the gift Count Angeli left for him in the abandoned warehouse. Yes, that priceless bond. Looking at this thing that turned Alfalfa City upside down, Orlando couldn't help but sigh. But soon, he put away these unnecessary emotions, hid the bond close to his body, and walked out. Outside the warehouse, the boys kept reporting back, saying that the leaders of the major forces in Alfalfa City wanted to see Orlando. But Orlando snorted coldly and did not agree. Instead, he asked, "Have you found out the details of the messenger from the east that I asked you to check before?" "Yes, the one who came to see Capone this time, who is from the east." "Viscount. Where is he now?" "In the cathedral in Dongcheng district." Orlando nodded, took a deep breath, touched the place where the bonds were hidden on his waist, and said, "Okay, let's go meet this Viscount of the East." The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 377. Sunday, if you were in other cities, would be the day of worship. But in Alfalfa City, a city without faith, the Holy Light Cathedral located in Dongcheng district is particularly deserted. This cathedral, which has been in disrepair for a long time, has experienced hundreds of years of wind and rain and has been abandoned several times. Priests don't get the respect they deserve in the city and are even treated as fat sheep by the villains here. Over time, they become unwilling to come. However, recently, a young bishop from the east came here, trying to bring the grace of the Lord of Glory to the city known as the most depraved city in the entire continent. Of course, this bishop does not really have the courage to sacrifice his life to feed the tiger, but because the city has gradually been controlled by the Alfalfa Brotherhood and is also controlled by the Eastern Territory in disguise. If you come here to preach, you will not be personally threatened. However, it currently seems that it will take some time for the villains in the city to become devout believers in the Lord of Glory. In the empty prayer hall, only a few people were worshipping. The young man in the leader's gorgeous clothes was none other than Lord Fei Yin, who was sent by the Eastern Territory to come to Alfalfa City to secretly hand over the bond to the North Wind Chamber of Commerce. This man has a handsome appearance and an extraordinary temperament, and there is an unconcealable arrogance between his eyebrows. This is also a characteristic shared by everyone who holds a high position at a young age. After the service, Lord Fayan chatted with the bishop for a few words and then left the prayer hall. Walking through the cloister alone, Lord Fayan came to the garden behind the church. "I'm sorry, Mr. Arnold, for keeping you waiting. Your Majesty, Viscount, you are too polite. Unfortunately, I came when I came and disturbed your worship," the president of the North Wind Chamber of Commerce respectfully said to Lord Faye. Welcoming him into the pavilion, he personally poured him a cup of coffee. Lord Fayan sat down at the table, took a sip of coffee, and then said bluntly, "Mr. Arnold, I am very disappointed with this incident." Arnold suddenly said with a bitter look on his face, "Lord Viscount, this is true, you can't blame me. Wasn't the thing stolen by someone from the Alfalfa Brotherhood? When Count Evan originally chose Alfalfa City as the trading location, he promised that my caravan would never encounter any danger here, but—" "Mr. Arnold, you obviously arrived earlier than the agreed time, but we are not ready yet," Lord Fayan interrupted, with a bit of embarrassment on his face. "Lord Viscount, I was worried about an accident on the road, so I set out early on purpose. Who knew something like this would happen in Alfalfa City?" Lord Fay opened his mouth but couldn't say anything more. He knew that this was technically an Eastern Territory problem, but the chaotic members of the Alfalfa Brotherhood were too difficult to control. "Mr. Arnold, then you shouldn't let two thieves steal such an important thing. Are the guards of your caravan just decorations?" Lord Fayan asked again. He still didn't want to bear the responsibility alone. Liability for bond theft. Arnold shook his head and said, "Sir Viscount, you don't know there were more than two thieves who visited our caravan that night." "Oh. Who else?" Arnold's eyes flashed, and he said seriously, "I don't know the true identity of the other party, but there was indeed a group of powerful masters who infiltrated our caravan that night. At that time, all the caravan security forces went to deal with these people, so the two thieves took advantage of the loophole." Fay said. Yi Ju frowned, obviously not expecting that there was such a secret. Seeing this, Arnold suggested again, "Lord Viscount, you can ask Lord Capone. After all, he has deeper control over the underground forces in Alfalfa City and may know what happened that night." "Capone?" Lord Fayan frowned. The frown deepened because there had been no news since Capone left alone last night. He still doesn't know where the other party is or what he is doing. At this time, a thought suddenly appeared in Lord Fayan's mind. Could it be the Capone faction on the night the bonds were stolen? Could it be that he was being tricked? When Arnold saw that Lord Faye was silent and his expression was changing, he knew that his hint had successfully affected the other party, so he said no more. Lies don't have to be told in complete detail. Sometimes, it's easier to succeed if you let the other person figure out the truth on their own. After a long time, Sir Faye said, "Mr. Arnold, you don't have to worry about the bonds. I will help you find them. You can go back and wait for the news." "Yes." After Arnold left, Sir Faye thought more and more. The more he felt that there was something wrong with Capone, the more he called his attendants to ask for news about Capone. However, to his disappointment, there was still no news from Capone. At this time, Fei Yujun couldn't help but start to have random thoughts. Couldn't it be that Capone escaped with the money? Not long after, the attendant came again to report, "My lord, Mr. Orlando is outside, asking for an audience." "Orlando?" Lord Fayan frowned, then nodded and said, "Bring him to see me." Soon, Orlando was there. Under the leadership of the attendant, he walked into the church alone and met Lord Fayan. As soon as he saw Orlando, Lord Fayan snorted coldly and said angrily, "Orlando, you still dare to come to see me?" Orlando bowed and saluted calmly, and then said, "Lord Viscount, I know you may be interested in me. I have some misunderstandings, but there are some important things that I must hand over to you in person. Fei Yinja raised his eyebrows and asked, what important things? Orlando then took a few steps forward, took out all the bonds hidden in his clothes, and placed them in front of Lord Fian. Lord Fei Yin's expression changed, and he quickly stepped forward to check. After confirming the authenticity and quantity of the bonds, he asked in a deep voice. Orlando, since these bonds are really in your hands, why didn't you take the initiative to hand them over in the first place? Come out. Lord Viscount, because I know the importance of these things, I don't want them to fall into the hands of people with malicious intentions. What do you mean? Orlando took a deep breath and said with a sad face, Sir, don't you understand, this is all a show directed and performed by Capone, he just wants to keep this bond. What? Lord Fian screamed. Arnold's report just now had already made Sir Fian suspicious of Capone, and now Orlando was added to the list. Lord Fian's thoughts were racing, but he still asked in a deep voice, do you have any evidence for saying this? Orlando nodded and said with confidence, my lord, at the beginning, my men didn't know about this deal at all. Not only they, but even I didn't know about the existence of bonds. When my men went to the caravan, they just wanted to make a small fortune. Unexpectedly, they happened to bump into a group of people fighting with the caravan guards. In the chaos, they stole the bond by accident. But the two boys were ignorant and didn't know what it was, so they handed it to me. I knew that this matter was of great importance, so I didn't explain it to them. In Capone's case, when they were tortured and interrogated, they had no idea that what they had taken was what Capone wanted. It was not. Until the end that Blue couldn't bear the punishment and bid him randomly, which made Capone suspect that the bonds were in my hands. Of course I refused to hand over the bond to Capone. Lord Fian did not know much about the specific circumstances of the original interrogation, so he did not doubt Orlando's story. It was not until the end of the story that he asked, why did you refuse to hand over the bond, give it to Capone? Because I suspect that the group of people who sneaked into the caravan were Capone's men. Before you came, Capone restrained the people of the Alfalfa Brotherhood and warned us not to attack the passing caravan, so we don't dare to attack the North Wind Chamber of Commerce, and Harry and Blue only dare to commit petty thefts. And besides himself, who dares to ignore Capone's warning at this time? Lord Fei Yin's eyes flashed slightly. No words were spoken. Seeing this, Orlando continued to explain, Sir, Capone came to me again last night, and said that as long as I hand over the bond, he can share it with me. Are you sure? Sir Fei Yin glared. Drink asked. Of course, Orlando puffed up his chest and said without fear, if you don't believe it, you can find Capone, I dare to confront him. Sir Fei Yin narrowed his eyes and looked at Orlando carefully. The other party looked back without fear, with a candid look. This gesture greatly reduced Lord Fei's suspicion of Orlando. He was silent for a moment and then asked, what happened last night? When I heard Capone say this, I immediately confirmed my previous suspicions, so I would not hand over the bond to him. So I pretended I went to collect the bonds, but actually, I took the opportunity to escape. After daybreak, I will take the initiative to come to you, hoping that you will seek justice for me. Lord Fei Yin pondered again for a while and then said to Orlando, okay, what you said, I will verify it. However, if you can take the initiative to hand over these bonds, I will definitely report this credit to Earl Avon. Thank you, Lord Viscount, Orlando bowed. He is not afraid of Fei Yuja going to verify it, because Capone has disappeared now, which is enough to prove the other party's guilty conscience. After Capone disappears, someone will inevitably fill his vacancy. As for this choice, Orlando bowed his head respectfully and smiled proudly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 378. In Silver Moon City. In the basement of the half-elf palace, Colin looked at Capone kneeling in front of him, satisfaction flashing in his eyes. As a result, he has a second level 6 blood slave among his blood shadow guards, which is something worth celebrating. To be honest, he did have Capone's idea at the beginning, otherwise, he would not have sent the blood slave Lucien to Alfalfa City, hoping to harvest a 5th level blood slave, but unexpectedly, Capone actually hid his strength. It is a pity that Capone was too confident and stepped into the trap set by Orlando alone. Moreover, when confronting Lucien, he also chose the stupidest way. Otherwise, Lucien alone would, although a person will not lose to Capone, he is not sure to keep the other person. Colin stared at Capone for a long time and suddenly felt that this person might be an important chess piece placed by the East in Alfalfa City. After all, 6th level warriors are not cabbages. Not even the Duke of St. Praça can look down on such a person. You must know that there are no strong men in the Holy Realm in the East. Level 6 is the pinnacle. From this point of view, Alfalfa City really occupies an extremely important position in the plan of the Eastern Territory, otherwise, Capone would not hide his strength and suffer in such a place. Thinking of this, Colin suddenly felt that the boy from Orlando might not be able to easily pass through the Eastern Territory and succeed Capone as the leader of the underground forces in Alfalfa City. However, he doesn't care about that now. Alfalfa City has never been a strategic point in Colin's plan. Even if the Eastern Territory regains control, it will have little impact. He can harvest a 6th level blood slave this time, which is actually a big profit. As for Orlando, it all depends on his own luck. If he can successfully pass the test, it will naturally be a surprise for Colin. If not, then he can only blame his own bad luck. In such a class-strict world, it is extremely difficult for ordinary people to jump over the Dragon Gate. Colin would not easily change his strategy or waste his resources for such a thief. In short, Orlando can only rely on himself next, and Colin hopes to see another surprise in the near future. While thinking about it, Capone had already put on fully armed armor under Colin's instructions, covering himself tightly. Bang bang. Reaching out and patting Capone's helmet twice, Colin showed a proud smile. Now that he had 2 6th level warrior blood slaves, Colin felt that he could officially consider his plan to hunt a 6th level knight. Of course, before that, Colin still had to stabilize the half-elf kingdom. After placing Capone, Colin left the basement. The basement leads directly to the Queen's study. However, considering that Elsa was about to give birth, Colin did not allow her to work anymore and drove her away to recuperate. At this time, there was only Colin's half-elf maid, Kathy Savoy, in the study. When he came to Silvermoon City this time, Colin brought Kathy with him, taking the opportunity to let her go home and have a look. However, after arriving in Silvermoon City, this half-elf maid never returned to the Savoy family's manor once, as if she had completely severed ties with the other party. Seeing Colin coming up from the basement, Kathy quickly poured him a cup of coffee and reported at the same time, "Master, Duke Medivh came to see you just now. When he saw that you were not there, he left a letter." Colin he nodded to indicate that he understood. Though Queen Elsa has returned to Silvermoon City, she is about to give birth after all, and many affairs of the half-elf kingdom are still left to Duke Medivh to handle. However, Duke Medivh comes to report to Colin every day. Obviously, he knew very well who was currently in charge of the half-elf kingdom. Colin sat down at the desk, drinking coffee and reading the letters left by Duke Medivh. It lists the affairs of the kingdom that have been handled by Duke Medivhian. At the same time, he once again reminded Colin that a large rebel force has gathered in Silvermoon City and is plotting evil. Seeing this, Colin couldn't help but smile inexplicably. Duke Medivh had reminded himself many times about this rebel force and had even suggested that they be arrested and imprisoned before the other party took action, so as not to disturb the Queen's childbirth. However, Colin never agreed, but asked him to be patient and wait patiently. This time Colin is conniving with these rebel forces in order to make all the half-elves who are dissatisfied with Queen Elsa jump out on their own initiative so that Colin can catch them all to avoid trouble in the future. Moreover, with the blood cavalry in the city, Colin was not worried that the situation would be out of his control. Even if all the Silver Moon Guards were instigated to rebel, Colin was sure to suppress them by force. What he was a little worried about now was whether someone would want to take advantage of the Queen and the child who was about to be born. For this reason, Colin has replaced all the guards in Queen Elsa's palace with Blood Shadow Guards. With the current combat power of the Blood Shadow Guards, no one can get close to Queen Elsa unless a strong man from the sanctuary appears or an army of tens of thousands rushes into the half-elf palace. The only thing he needs to be wary of are the doctors and maids who deliver Queen Elsa's baby. However, these doctors and maids were all personally selected by Elsa, so there should be no problem with their loyalty. Thinking of this, Colin put down the note and was about to leave the study, but saw Kathy still standing there with her hands tied, looking like he was hesitant to speak. "Kathy, what else can you do?" "Master, there is something I need to report to you." "Say." Kathy looked up at Colin carefully and said softly, "Master, Baron Savoy sent someone to contact me yesterday." Lynn knew that the Baron of Savoy mentioned by Kathy should be one of her cousins. When Kathy helped Colin trick the Pegasus Legion into storming Silvermoon City, Colin had promised to give the Savoy family a baronship after the success. However, Kathy herself would rather be Colin's maid than become a baron in the half-elf kingdom, so the title fell to her cousin. "What is he looking for you for?" Colin asked with a smile, seeming to realize something. Kathy hesitated for a moment, but still said frankly, "He was asking me who was the doctor who delivered Her Majesty the Queen's baby." Colin's eyes suddenly narrowed. Seeing this, Kathy quickly explained, "Master, don't worry, I didn't tell him anything." Colin nodded with satisfaction and said, "You did a good job. However, I suggest you go back to the Savoy family. If Baron Savoy asks again, you will tell him the identity of the midwife." But, Kathy was dumbfounded and faltered at a loss. Colin walked up to Kathy with a smile, patted the little maid on the shoulder, and said warmly, "Don't worry, I have already arranged it. In fact, I am also curious, what tricks can those people play?" "Yes, sir," Kathy nodded, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Colin understood that Kathy was worried about her family, so he comforted her, "You have been with me for so long, you should understand that I am not a murderous person. Therefore, the Savoy family will not cut off the inheritance on the contrary, we are getting rid of some after the rotten branches and leaves. Your family will be able to achieve better development." "Master, I understand." Kathy was relieved, nodded, and left. Colin looked at the other persons retreating back, smiled and said to himself, "I've given you the opportunity, but you must not let me down too much."